Hello and welcome back to official channel of Law Prep Tutorial. I am Ritu Sood. Today we are going to talk about one of the very important topics and probably something with which you people struggle. तो अगर आपको ऐसा लगता है कि क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग में बहुत ज़्यादा पढ़ के चर्निंग करना पड़ता है, ब्रेन चर्न करना पड़ता है, तो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे लगता है कि आपके अप्रोच को थोड़ा सा सुधारने की ज़रूरत है. लुक, अंडरस्टैंड, व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग, इट इज़ ऑल अबाउट योर एनालिटिकल एंड रीजनिंग एबिलिटी. दैट मीन्स अब आप जब इतना सारा मॉक कर चुके हैं, इतनी सारी पढ़ाई कर चुके हैं, देन देयर ऑट टू बी सर्टन हैक्स, थोड़े बहुत स्मार्ट ट्रिक्स होने चाहिए जिसके थ्रू हम क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग को सॉल्व कर सकते हैं और हमारी एक्यूरेसी बढ़ा सकते हैं एंड स्पीड अप कर सकते हैं. नाउ ऑफ कोर्स देयर इज नो शॉर्टकट ऑफ रीडिंग. रीडिंग इज मस्ट. पैसेज तो पढ़ना ही पड़ेगा. तो इट इज़ नॉट लाइक दैट कि बिना पैसेज पढ़े यू कैन डू सम चमत्कार. लेकिन अगर हम पैसेज पढ़ने के साथ किसी तरीके से स्पीड अप कर सकें, किसी तरीके से क्वेश्चंस और आंसर्स को एक्यूरेट कर सकें, सो यस ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर सर्टन थिंग्स दैट यू नीड टू पे अटेंशन टू. एंड वन ऑफ द कॉमन प्रॉब्लम्स जो मैंने देखी है आप लोगों की बार बार आप लोगों से डिस्कस करने के बाद, दैट in a single passage you are able to solve somewhere 2 to 3 questions correct और फिर 1-2 questions incorrect हो जाते हैं. Now guys, अगर आपको पैसेज नहीं समझ में आया तो ऑलमोस्ट 4-5 क्वेश्चन ही गलत हो जाने चाहिए. Why it is happening कि आप 2-3 क्वेश्चन सही कर रहे हो फिर 2-3 क्वेश्चन गलत कर रहे हो. That means कहीं ना कहीं पैसेज पढ़ते वक्त और क्वेश्चन पढ़ते वक्त there was a disconnect in my mind and I dealt every question as an individual question rather than part of an entity. Now always remember, when you are reading passage of a critical reasoning, read it purposefully. आप सबको पता है कि जब critical reasoning का कोई passage develop किया जाता है तो उसमें there is one particular thing that author is trying to convey. तो जब भी you are reading purposefully, whenever you are reading with intent, you ought to pay attention that what is that one point with which author is trying to deal with or convey to us. So whenever you are reading purposefully, you have to be really very careful about your logical flow of thought that is coming in mind, as well as read for structure. That means, let's say whatever author is trying to deal, it has been very clearly mentioned in the first paragraph. और अक्सर ऐसा होता है कि फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ में बहुत क्लियरली इंटेंट लिखा होता है ऑथर का. इट हैपन्स इनटू रेयर ऑफ द रेयरेस्ट केस कि आपका जो की आइडिया है वो सेकेंड, थर्ड या फोर्थ पैराग्राफ में आ रहा है. मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द टाइम वो फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ में आ जाता है. तो जब आप फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ पढ़ रहे हैं, ट्राई टू मेक योर रीडिंग कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव. समझ के पढ़िए, स्लो पढ़िए. And then as soon as you move to later part of the paragraph or second paragraph, try to connect it कि क्या ये first paragraph से किसी तरीके से connected है. Is it supporting, contradicting, doing what? Now, one is yes, purposeful reading. That means when you are reading, you ought to be careful about the structure. You ought to be careful about the intent. Second important thing is weed out unnecessary information. What we do, we try to remember everything from the passage. Do not do that. Understand that author is trying to make a point and rest all the pieces of information are there to convince you. So he may give you data, he may give you examples, बहुत सारी चीज़ें देंगे. अगर मैं सब कुछ याद रखने की कोशिश करूँगी, it is almost next to impossible for any of the student to remember everything. So जितना ऐसा लगता है कि ये बहुत डेटा स्पेसिफिक है, नंबर्स हैं, एग्जाम्पल्स हैं, try to keep them separate and try to pick up the bigger picture. और हमेशा याद रखिए there is only one single idea that runs across the passage. So pay attention to that. Now next important thing is read the question stem carefully. अभी तक जितना मेरा ऑब्जर्वेशन है, इफ़ यू हैव रिटन मोर देन 10-15 मॉक्स, यू मस्ट हैव सॉर्टेड दीज अबाउट 2 एरियाज. ये 2 अबाउट 2 एरियाज आप लोगों ने बहुत प्यार से सॉर्ट आउट कर लिया होगा. आपको ये लगता होगा कि पैसेज तो मुझे समझ में आ रहा है, लेकिन उसके बाद व्हेन यू रीच टू क्वेश्चन, यू यूजुअली आर इन अ हरी एंड आपका जो स्कूल वाला टेंडेंसी होता है कि मुझे डायरेक्ट आंसर मिल जाना चाहिए, वो आपको ओवर पावर कर जाता है. सो ऑलवेज पे अटेंशन, रीड द क्वेश्चन स्टेम केयरफुली. आफ्टर रीडिंग द क्वेश्चन स्टेम, ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड एग्जैक्टली मुझसे पूछा क्या जा रहा है. डू नॉट सिंपली रन टू पैसेज बैक एंड फोर्थ एंड लुक कि अच्छा ठीक है इसका आंसर यहाँ पर लिखा हुआ, राइट. देन बिसाइड्स दैट, रीड द answer options carefully and eliminate the options. You know that any extreme option which will have every, each, all, बहुत कम चांसेस होते हैं कि ये आंसर हो. ऐसा नहीं है कि कभी आंसर नहीं होते. अगर पैसेज का टोन खुद में एक्सट्रीम है तो हो सकता है, राइट. लेकिन ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि पैसेज का टोन एक्सट्रीम ना हो एंड यू आर ओवरलुकिंग दोज वर्ड्स. सो प्लीज बी केयरफुल अबाउट इट. लेट्स ट्राई टू पिक अप टू ऑफ द मेथड्स. एक हम करेंगे कि हम पैसेज को पढ़ते हैं, देखते हैं कि कौन से नेसेसरी पीसेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन थे जो हमें दिमाग में रखने चाहिए थे वाइल सॉल्विंग. एंड अनदर, हम पैसेज ही नहीं देखते, लेट्स ट्राई टू यूज अवर ओन लॉजिक एंड try to figure out if we can zero in onto the answers only by our own logic and eliminating options, right. And understand one thing, again I am telling you, I never say कि रीडिंग छोड़ना है पैसेज का. पैसेज जरूर पढ़ना है आप लोगों को, ठीक है. Now let's pick up this particular passage. The depreciation of an economy's currency is not a matter of concern in itself. The decline in value against major currencies has to be viewed within a set of macroeconomics factors. So my first line talks about decline in value of a currency and says if is an isolated factor, nothing to worry about. But if it is happening against major currencies, it has to be looked within the set of macroeconomics factor. That means what are the other factors that are influencing. So my first line makes it clear that it is all about decline in value of a currency. Then it goes on, the recent depreciation of the Indian rupee is a case in point. Now look, from a very broader statement, he is coming to Indian rupee. Then he says the rupee has been depreciating for a long time. What are the concern? What are of concern now are the rate at which the depreciation is occurring and the underlying factors causing the change. Now look, my first line made it clear that decline itself is not a problem, but the macroeconomics factor that are influencing it should be considered. And now in the later part, he or the author is elaborating it, right? And then what are the factors that he is mentioning is the Russia-Ukraine war has disrupted supply chain, causing commodity prices to rise. Now look, these are the informations which are given. These are the pieces of information which are given to support or elaborate the factors that are causing the trouble. So it says has disrupted supply chains, causing commodity prices to rise, leading to the worldwide hardening of inflationary trends. This in turn has caused major central banks to raise interest rates, forcing the investors back to the safe haven of US dollar. For India, these headwinds from the global economy have caused several problems. Now here he is coming back to what are the problems for Indian currency. The rise in international rates in developed country markets have caused significant outflow of portfolio investments from India. So this is one of the major problems for India, aggravating the already climbing demand for dollars from a rising import bill. And then this is additional information which probably we can omit. So our first paragraph talked about decline in value of rupee and underlying causes behind it. And that is all global economies turmoil or global situation or scenarios turmoil. Now, our second paragraph says, in the face of these pressures, the rupee left to itself would decline in value as the rupee price of a dollar would increase substantially. So, author is of a view that it cannot be left as it is. That means author is hinting that government should do something, right? And when author is hinting government should do something, there will be by default some suggestion what government should do. Now, that is one way the RBI could stem the tide would be to sell off dollars in the market to ease the supply situation. However, now this is something very important when you talk about however. However is a word which shows contradiction, and it says this would mean that while the value of rupee could be contained, the nation's foreign exchange kitty would start to erode further. So yes, of course, he's saying that one way is RBI can sell off the dollars to ease the market, but it has its own drawbacks. Then the RBI has been doing exactly that. The challenge before the RBI is this: how much to let the rupee depreciate and how much to intervene to prop it up. Too much depreciation would raise domestic inflation rates as the rupee price of imports, especially oil, would raise costs of production. It could trigger a rise in policy controlled interest rates. While closely monitoring inflationary expectations, the biggest challenge is to navigate unpredictable international economic shocks in the near future. The Indian economy's health is not exactly at its best. Exports may not be able to take advantage of falling rupee since international demand is expected to stagnate. That means even if rupee's value is falling down, export will not increase because the international market is not ready, or it is getting stagnated and not ready to import much. India's growth and employment situations are yet to stabilize to what they were about a decade ago. The RBI has difficult choices controlling inflation versus stimulating growth and stabilizing the rupee without severely diminishing the economy's foreign exchange kitty. Now, if we have read the entire passage, it talks about declining value of a currency, categorically rupee, the challenges, what RBI can do and what RBI is doing and what are the challenges ahead, right? Now, let's move to question. Which of the following is the author most likely to agree with? Now, whenever you are provided with these kind of questions, you simply have to remember that these are the questions which fall under the category of true and false. So, first option says it is a major cause for concern if an economy's currency is depreciating. Now, it is talking about only currency depreciating. But my passage is focusing upon macro economy. So, that means it is not something which we are looking for. B says currency depreciation is not a reason for worry in itself, but if macroeconomic factors are not good, they may be cause for concern. Now look, here the option is very moderate and exact rephrasement of our first two lines. So this probably can be our answer. We need to look at rest of the options as well. The fact that the Indian rupee is witnessing a decline in the value against major currencies is very worrisome. Now again it is talking about decline in value of Indian rupee in isolation, not in context of macroeconomic factors. So we will eliminate it. These two options are, first and third options are too specific to select. A central bank must always, now look, this is something which is known as extreme option. So we are able to eliminate three of the options easily by paying attention to the first paragraph carefully. Now, next question says, based on the author's argument, which of the following, if true, would reduce the decline in the value of rupee? That means my question asks that reduce in the decline of value of rupee. That means value of rupee should not decrease if any of these are correct. Now, first is appointing a new governor for RBI. This option neither has been discussed nor has been hinted in the passage. So, we can eliminate easily. Now, as soon as we look at the question stem, which asks that what can we do to stop decline of value of rupee, we have to look for the reason why actually the value of rupee has been declining. And if we do not remember all the facts, but we know that there were international conditions, Russia-Ukraine war and rest of the things which were impacting India's currency decline, right? So, if there is any improvement over there, if we can bring some improvement over there, we will be able to stop the decline of currency value, right? A steep increase in commodity prices and the continued disruption of supply chain. Of course, continued disruption of supply chain is not good for any country, any country's currency. So, we can rule it out easily. A reduction in worldwide inflationary trends and the reduction of interest rates in developed country market. Right. Now, this is something, even if I do not understand this part, though it is given in the passage very clearly that interest rate which has been increased outside India is one of the reasons why the money has been pulled out from India. So, a reduction in worldwide inflationary trend is something which is positive for economy of any of the countries. So, probably this should be my answer. And D says RBI buying as many dollars as possible from the market. Now, again, this is extreme option, so we can eliminate this. So, we can zero in on to option C, right? Now, let's have a glance upon the next question. Which of the following, if true, would most weaken the author's argument? Now, as soon as we look at the question stem like weaken the author's argument, strengthen the author's argument, we need to quickly go back to the passage mentally, not literally, mentally, and try to reframe what is the argument that author has made. As soon as we are able to do so, we will be able to weaken it, right? Now, here my author talks about decline in currency's value and looking it from the perspective of macroeconomics factor influencing it, and Indian rupee value is declining because of international factors impacting it. Now, we have to weaken that, right? So, Indian economy has been affected by the global inflationary trend and increase of interest rate in developed country market. This is true as per the passage. So, since it is true as per the passage, it will not weaken my argument. It will rather strengthen my argument. So, we can eliminate that. Since developed country markets have increased their interest rates, global investors have pulled their investment out of other economies and routed them to such developed country markets. This is also true as per the passage. And if this is happening, definitely whatever author is saying about decline in Indian rupee is going to be true. So, this can be eliminated. C says, as the demand for US dollar increases, it is likely the rupee price of a dollar would increase substantially. This is also true as per the passage. So, we can eliminate three of the options very easily. D says the Indian economy and currency are highly protected and have been insulated from the effects of global inflationary trends, which is just contrary to the passage's idea. So, this should be the option which is weakening your argument. Now, let's move to the next question. Now, I believe that till time you are very clear that if we read passage carefully, categorically, starting paragraph, we will be able to solve majority of the questions if we are paying attention to the question stem. Based on the author's argument, which of the following must necessarily be true? Again, this is true and false. And whenever it is true and false, either we can recall the key idea and trust upon our understanding of positive negative tone of the passage, or we can simply go back to the passage. Now, first option says the continuing depreciation of Indian rupee as its current rate coupled with worldwide inflationary trends would result in immense political instability. Now, when we look at something which is related to true and false, we eliminate any option which has some external factor. Nowhere it is talking about political instability, so we will rule it out. B says if nothing else is done, the rise of interest rates in developed country markets coupled with hardening of inflationary trends across the world will result in a fall in the value of rupee against dollar. This is something which has exactly been said in the passage categorically, first paragraph's last line and second paragraph's first line. So we can think that this is probably my answer. Now C says the inflationary trend continue to harden across the world, and if the interest rates in developed country market continue to rise, portfolio investor will increase their investment in India. This is just contrary to the passage, so we can rule it out. Then it says if nothing else is done, the rise of interest rates in developed country markets coupled with hardening of inflationary trend across the world will result in rise of value of rupee against the dollar. Now, here the only difference is fall and rise in the value of rupee, and since we know that entire passage talking about decline in value of rupee, we can zero in on to the answer. I hope that this is clear. Now we are going to look at one of the tricks that I believe that every student must know how to decode passage by looking at the question stem carefully and putting the logic. Though without reading passage, it is not suggested at all. Paying attention to question stem only can give you a fair enough idea that what probably the passage would be about, which kind of answer options you can expect, and what could be probably the answer. Let's have a glance. I have picked up only questions from some other passage. Based on the author's argument, which of the following, if true, would have resulted in weakening rather than deepening of public trust in newspapers since the pandemic? Now, weakening rather deepening the public trust in newspaper. Why do we trust newspaper? Because we get authentic information over there. So, if we want that, or if my author wants that the trust in newspaper will get eroded kind of answer option, we have to somewhere tell that some misinformation is being spread. Now, newspaper were very careful in ensuring they reported accurate and true news. If this is true, what will happen? My faith will increase in the newspaper. So, this cannot be my answer. B says newspaper played a leading role in exposing lies and misinformation. If lies are being exposed and misinformation is being exposed, definitely I'll trust more and more upon the source. So, definitely this is also ruled out. C says newspaper actively disseminate misinformation during the lockdown and made no efforts to expose lies. If newspaper is not making any effort to expose lie, will I trust upon the newspaper? Of course not. So if this is happening, I will not trust upon newspaper and it will result in weakening public trust in the newspaper. Newspaper alerted the public to the fact that the number of sources were spreading crude forms of misinformation during the pandemic. Now, newspapers alerted the public to the fact that the number of sources were spreading crude forms of misinformation during the pandemic. Even this could be my answer, but since it is talking about actively disseminated, we will eliminate this option and we will zero in on to option C. Let's have a glance upon next question. Which of the following would be an effective way of making print media more competitive? Now, if I am talking about making print media more competitive, I have to tell certain things which can actually be beneficial for newspaper media. Slowing down the process of print media production. Of course, slowing down is a negative thing to do, so we can eliminate it. B says using more expensive printing methods that achieve better print quality even if results in newspaper becoming more expensive. More expensive is again something which we do not want, so this can be ruled out. C says only publishing newspapers on the alternate days. That is completely absurd idea, so we can eliminate it. Developing ways of ensuring that print media can reach readers more speedily. This is something positive, and any of the sane person would recommend this if one wants newspaper to reach more and more. So, even if we are not familiar with the passage, by our logic, by our understanding, we can eliminate and select the options if we are looking it carefully. You can try rest of the questions of the same passage. This is from CLAT 2023 logical reasoning section, and try to apply it, but do not try to apply it without reading the passage. I am again warning you people, these are the things to pay attention and the tricks to pay attention while solving the passages of logical reasoning, but do not go directly to the questions and try to do it with your own general knowledge. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the session. See you again with some interesting topic.